They told him never to speak to her, never to look her in the eyes, never to step within 10 paces of her door, and if summoned deny it, plead error, and walk away with your life and rank intact. Lieutenant Rian Vale had memorized every page of the protocol binder they gave him when he was assigned to the Zentry envoy detail. Those pages were more fear than instruction. She once ended a rebellion with a whisper, Commander Hales had said in a voice that didn't dare rise above. A murmur. Don't confuse her silence with safety. Ralzara. They called her the Emerald Wound. No one healed from her presence. Not fully, not even in memory. She wasn't just royalty. She was caste-born, the daughter of the High Warlord who held 5 sectors in submission through diplomacy wrapped in threat. She had negotiated peace by promising war, and every soldier knew the tale of the noble who insulted her braid in council and was found 2 hours later with his lungs compressed to the size of fruit. No one could prove it. No one tried so when Rian was ordered to escort a sealed artifact to the general's wing. He assumed he would hand it off to a guard and be gone in seconds. The corridor leading there was a cathedral of gold and shadows. Every step echoed too loud. Every breath tasted like incense and iron. And then he arrived. The guards weren't there. Instead, a single light blinked green beside the etched panel of her chamber. A handprint scanner. Waiting, ready, expecting him. His orders were clear. Drop the artifact outside. Leave. Do not enter. But the corridor pressure had fluctuated during the ascent, and the object, some kind of ancient crystal core, sealed in a shockproof vault, was known to fracture under unstable conditions. He hesitated, heart pounding, then pressed his hand to the scanner. The door opened with a hiss. Like the room itself exhaled. Inside was a world far from the cold symmetry of the ship. It was warm, crimson, gold. The air smelled of burning flowers and spice-laced oil. Fabric draped from the ceiling like a jungle canopy. The walls pulsed faintly, alive with old alien runes. And the bed massive, carved from bonewood and layered in silk the color of spilled wine. She wasn't armored, not seated on a throne. She stood barefoot near a column of light that stretched down from the ceiling, her skin a shimmering green kissed with gold at the edges. Her braid was undone, cascading over one shoulder like a living sash. She wore only a crimson bra of reactive cloth that gleamed like embers, and a skirt that didn't reach her knees. He froze. Ralzara turned to him slowly, and her eyes gilded. Luminous locked with his. He wanted to speak. Protocol screamed in his ears not to. But her gaze silenced everything. She stepped toward him, silent as shadow, each movement fluid and deliberate like a predator stalking prey that didn't yet know it was already caught. Then, without breaking eye contact, she reached down and lifted the hem of her skirt just enough. Her thigh glinted like sculpted jade in the warm light. "Salute me," she said, voice like silk cut with steel. "Like your planet depends on it." He didn't remember stepping forward, only the silence that swallowed him whole once she spoke. His training, his pulse, his rank, all of it dissolved in the space between her lifted skirt and her command. "Salute me," like his planet depended on it. And maybe it did. Maybe something in him would crack if he turned and walked away now. The artifact still rested in his arms, heavy and humming faintly through its containment seal. But the weight in his chest? That was all her. Ralzara let her skirt fall, not abruptly, not in shame, with intent. Deliberate, like closing a page of scripture no one else had earned the right to read. "Place it on the table," she said without looking at him. He moved like a man under spell. When he set the case down, the runes on the wood glowed momentarily in response to the object's presence. He didn't know what was inside, classified above his clearance. But even the container felt sacred, or dangerous. He turned. She was still watching him, not with hunger. Not yet. with precision. "You've broken 3 protocols since you walked in," she said quietly. He nodded. "I'll report myself." "You won't," she said. "You'll listen." She circled him, not fast, not flirtatious, like she was measuring him, his frame, his breath, his loyalty. "You've stared at me before," she said. 3.2 seconds longer than regulation allows. He flushed. "And yesterday in the war chamber, you dropped your report when I spoke." His jaw tightened. "Don't lie," she said, stopping behind him. "I don't punish truth, only cowardice." He closed his eyes. "Yes, I've looked, but never dishonorably." "What's honorable about denying yourself what you want?" His breath caught. She stepped around him now, moving to face him fully again. Her fingers lifted, brushing the insignia on his uniform. Fingers light as heat but sharp in their certainty. "Do you know what this symbol means to me?" she asked. "Rank. Duty." "It means history," she whispered. "It means 10 generations of blood and expectation. It means I was born to command and never to crave." A beat passed. "Until last week," she added. He blinked. Ralzara single quotes as voice dipped lower, like a private war whispered behind her teeth. "You were the only man in that room who didn't flinch when I entered. The only one who handed me a datapad without your hands trembling. And yet, you shake now." She stepped closer, her body now a breath away. "I am not asking you to kneel," she said. "I'm asking you why you haven't." "Because," he said softly, "I don't want to kneel for power. I want to kneel for permission." The silence grew dense. Her fingers reached up again, not to remove his insignia this time, but to gently grip the collar of his shirt. "Permission," she echoed. He nodded. "Then earn it." With that, she turned and walked deeper into the room, toward the corner veiled in shadows and silk. With a flick of her fingers, a portion of the drapery fell, revealing a raised platform with a shallow bowl of glowing blue water. Steam rose from its surface, perfumed and warm. "This is a Zenturi rite," she said. "A trust bath. Meant only for those whose loyalty is being questioned or tested." He stepped forward slowly. "And what am I?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached behind her back and unfastened the clasp of her crimson bra. It slid from her body like a whisper, caught for a moment on her shoulder before falling to the floor. She still didn't face him, only stepped into the shallow pool, the water rising up her calves, her thighs, then her waist. Her voice carried across the steam, echoing in something more ancient than seduction. "If you enter this bath, you will be seen, not as soldier, not as male, not as human, but as vulnerable." He swallowed. "And you," she added, finally turning to him, completely bare under the haze, "will see me the same." Her skin glistened in the heat. Her scars showed, now across her ribs, her shoulder, one faint line at her thigh. She was not perfection. She was survival, and he was already halfway undressed. He stepped toward the water, boots left behind, shirt discarded. His chest rose and fell like the beginning of a storm. As he entered the pool, their eyes met. This was no longer a summons, no longer a command. This was the moment the universe tilted, and 2 enemies of protocol stepped willingly into each other's ruin. The next morning came like judgment. No horn sounded, no alarm blared, but the station felt different, quieter, colder, as if the walls themselves knew something had happened that couldn't be undone. Rian Vale woke alone. The warmth beside him, once alive with breath and muscle and damp whispers, was now just wrinkled silk and fading scent. Her side of the bed was cold. The crimson sheets still held the shape of her body, like a memory refusing to release its hold on him. He sat up slowly. Outside the chamber's filtered glass windows, the stars burned just the same, distant, silent, Indifferent. His uniform lay folded at the foot of the bed, neatly, deliberately, but his insignia gone, replaced with a single strand of her loosened braid. It wasn't a gift. It was a warning. He dressed with quiet hands, each button trembling under his fingers. There was no ceremony to it, no ritual. Only the creeping realization that whatever they had shared the night before, no matter how sacred it had felt, wasn't meant to survive the morning. When he stepped into the corridor outside her quarters, 2 sentry guards flanked the entrance. Didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their black armor glinted like obsidian under the hallway lights. And though they said nothing, their silence screamed, "You were never meant to be here." He kept his gaze straight. His boots thudded softly on the velvet-lined floor, every step echoing like betrayal. By the time he reached the central command ring, the whispers had already grown fangs. He was seen in her wing after curfew. They say he stayed the whole night. No human's ever been summoned twice. Not without consequence. Rian moved through them like a ghost. Salutes came late. Glances came faster. Eyes shifted from curiosity to caution. He was marked now not with ink or exile but with speculation. The kind of attention that could end careers in this place. She didn't show up to morning, council. Or midday briefing, or her usual combat drills in the courtyard where her presence once struck. All like lightning before a storm. She vanished, and in that silence, doubt grew like a cancer. What if it wasn't more? What if he had been a vessel, nothing more than a physical confession of what she could never say aloud? What if he had meant nothing and she had already moved on leaving? Behind a soldier who confused heat for meaning? 2 days passed, and then, on the 3rd, she returned. Ralzara walked into the grand strategy chamber like a thunderclap made flesh, full formal dress. Gold trim braided across her chest like a declaration of lineage. Not one hair out of place. Not one flicker of hesitation. Dignitaries bowed. Officers stood. And Rian, he remained frozen because she didn't look at him. Not once. Her posture was flawless, her tone perfect. She answered diplomatic queries with blade-edged clarity, calculated. Gestures and the same poise she wielded on the battlefield, but he saw it. The tightness in her jaw. The second breath she took before addressing the ambassador from Sector K-12. The way her eyes lingered, too long on a map projection, avoiding the empty seat near his. And then the meeting ended. The room emptied, and she remained seated. He approached her slowly, like stepping toward a wound that hadn't stopped bleeding. And yet he couldn't stop himself. "I didn't expect silence," he said, voice low. "Not after a night like that." Ralzara didn't move. Didn't blink. Then coldly, "Precisely," she said. "Then you misunderstand what that night was." His breath hitched. He stepped closer. "So it meant nothing?" Her lips parted. No words, only silence stretching between them like the edge of a blade. "Say it," he pressed. "Say it meant nothing. That you felt nothing when you touched me." Her jaw clenched. Her voice cracked, not loud enough for anyone to hear, except him. "Don't ask me to lie." He felt something rupture in his chest. A breath he didn't know he was holding finally released. "Then don't ask me to walk away," he said. She looked at him now. Really looked. Her eyes burned not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Fear. "You once told me to salute you like my planet depended on it," he whispered. He reached out, slow, placing his hand gently against her chest over her heart. "Well, I'm here, and I'm not saluting anymore." He paused. "I'm staying." She stared at him, and for the first time since he met her, her power didn't scare him. It broke for him, but she stood, not because she wanted to leave, because she didn't know how not to. The summons came in the middle of the 4th watch when the station was quiet, when the stars outside blinked in silence and most of the crew had folded themselves into sleep or their own secret regrets. Rian was reviewing patrol reports when the message appeared on his datapad. It bore no seal, no signature, just one line. Balcony above the throne hall. Come alone. He didn't hesitate, not because he was brave, because he already knew who it was. No one else used that place, not even the counselors. The balcony was sacred, reserved for judgments handed down in silence or for watching executions that required no words, just eyes, just consequence. The walk through the empty halls was slow, deliberate. His boots echoed against the polished obsidian, every step swallowed by the weight in his chest. Outside the chamber, the lift to the upper balcony hummed like a waiting confession booth. When he stepped inside, it sealed with a hiss and carried him upward toward whatever truth she was ready to reveal or bury. The doors opened to silence, and to her ralzara stood at the edge of the balcony, arms crossed, her back to him. Her braid was loose again, not coiled in command but drifting with the cold wind that spun through the high atmosphere. She wore no armor, no braid clasps of status, just a soft tunic the color of wet stone and trousers bound at the ankle. She looked smaller somehow, but only in shape, not in presence. He approached her slowly. "You came," she said, still. Not turning. "You called," he answered. A long pause stretched between them. The banners of the Zentry Empire fluttered far below, gold and black and eternal, symbols of power stitched into silk. "I'm being recalled," she said finally. Her voice sounded like it had been buried beneath hours of silence, clawing. "It's way back up. My people believe I've lost my discipline, that I've grown too close to the humans." He stopped beside her, close enough to see the rise and fall of her breath. "Are they wrong?" She exhaled through her nose. "No." Another silence. Then she turned. "My father sent a message. If I don't return for reassessment, I'll be stripped of my caste and marked for exile." He met her eyes. "And if you go?" She looked away. "I lose you." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They dropped like stone into water, deep, permanent, undeniable. He swallowed, trying to breathe past the rush in his throat. "You told me I wasn't what you could keep. Because legacy said I couldn't," she said. "Because duty always shouted louder than my heart." He stepped closer, almost touching her. "And what does your heart say now?" She looked at him, and for the first time, Rian saw her without the fire, without the crown, without the wound. Just a woman, powerful, terrified, and breaking. "I crave you," she whispered. "Not just your body, not just the night. You make me unguarded." "And in your world," he said, finishing for her, "that's dangerous." She nodded. "Double quotes in mine," he said softly. "It's called love." She blinked. Her lips trembled. Her breath caught like a wire tightening in her chest. He reached out and touched her face gently. "What do you want, Ralzara?" Her eyes closed, and when she opened them again, they were wet. "I want to choose you," she whispered. "But I'm terrified I'll burn everything else to the ground." His hand slipped behind her neck, thumb resting on her jaw. "Then let it burn. You don't know what you're saying." "I do. Exile means yes," he said, "and I'll walk into it with you." That broke her. She stepped into him like a wave crashing through armor, kissed him with a shudder, not of lust, but release. It was the kiss of surrender, the kiss of a war ending inside her. They didn't go back to the bedroom. They didn't need the silks or the candles. There, on the sacred balcony beneath stars, no one else could see, she wrapped herself around him like armor made of trust. Their hands, their mouths, their skin met in silence, slow and reverent. Not to hide, not to claim but to remember that in this moment no title mattered. She kissed every fear he never spoke. He touched every scar she had never let anyone see. And when it was over, She held his face, eyes trembling. "If I burn," she whispered, "then so do you." He smiled, gladly. They arrived just after dawn, her father's fleet, 12 royal dreadships, black as judgment, suspended like blades above the station. No warning, no negotiation, only presence. Like a reminder carved into the sky, "She belongs to us," the council. Chamber trembled under the weight of it. Emissaries whispered of political tension. High officers paced corridors, boots clicking too fast to hide their panic. And somewhere deep within that swirl of command and decorum, Ralzara stood still. Still, but not silent. She dressed that morning not in her caste regalia, but in simplicity. A muted gray robe, no braid clasps, no crest. She wasn't dressing to impress her lineage. She was dressing for war, not the kind fought with blades or ships, but the kind that costs you everything sacred for a truth no one else understands. Rian watched from the perimeter as she stepped into the throne hall, once her domain, now her trial. The room filled fast. Dignitaries from every quadrant of the Zentri Empire, high generals, warlords, silent judges cloaked in gold-threaded black. Her father's emissary stood at the center, a man of rigid posture and glass eyes, who had spoken death sentences with a smile. He held out the parchment inked and encoded. "You have one chance to return," he said, his voice echoing across the carved stone chamber. "Renounce the betrayal. Submit for reassessment. Your caste awaits your obedience." The silence that followed was so complete, Rian swore he could hear her heartbeat. Or maybe it was his. Ralzara stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberately, she took the decree from the emissary's hand, unrolled it. "Read it." Then she turned and walked to the ceremonial firebowl at the front of the hall. The room shifted. No one spoke. No one dared. She held the decree above the flame. "I renounce nothing," she said, voice like a blade drawn from velvet. "But I submit no longer." The parchment dropped into the fire. It caught instantly. Blue flame licked its edges, devouring every trace of imperial ink. When the last of it turned to ash, she reached up slow, precise, and unclasped her caste insignia from her shoulder. Her hand shook, only once, then she placed it into the fire too. Gasps echoed like falling glass. The crest, a relic older than most in the room, cracked as it burned. The gold bent, twisted, and finally melted into formlessness. When the fire died down, Ralzara turned. "I am no longer your daughter," she said to no one and everyone. "No longer your weapon." She walked forward through the center of the hall where once she had issued commands and reached the base of the dais where Rian stood, silent, still unsure if he should breathe. Without ceremony, without warning, she took his hand. Gasps turned to murmurs. Some rose in protest. Others froze in disbelief. But she didn't flinch. She didn't explain. She walked hand in hand with him, head high, eyes unbowed, as the empire behind her collapsed into whispers and silence. He followed, not like a man being led, but like someone walking beside the truth. They didn't speak until they were past the final arch of the royal hall, until the corridor swallowed them in shadow. Ralzara stopped. "They'll erase me." "Then let them," he said. "They'll say I betrayed my bloodline." He turned to face her fully. "You didn't betray anything. You chose yourself." She looked at him, and her eyes flickered with something between grief and relief. "I don't know what comes next." He stepped closer. "Then let's build it." When they reached the neutral settlement, a remote outpost on a dust-choked moon forgotten by most of the galaxy, there were no guards waiting, no fanfare, no judgment. Only wind and soil. And possibility. The home they were given was small. Metal walls, a bunk. One table. But in that silence, they breathed easier. She shed her titles like armor. Her hair came down in waves now. Her skin bore no crest. and her voice, once edged with command, softened into something warmer. They worked the soil together, planted heat-resistant crops, repaired water lines, learned to laugh without looking over their shoulders. Yet even in exile, they were watched. Villagers stared when she passed, too tall, too strong, too other. But Rian? He touched her waist like the galaxy had always meant her to be his. One evening, under the setting twin suns, she turned to him as they knelt in the dirt planting root bulbs. "You're not afraid?" she asked. He brushed mud from her cheek. They've always talked. Now they get to watch a woman who burned her past just to kiss the man she wanted. She blinked. And then slowly she smiled, not as a warrior, not as an heir, but as a woman who had finally chosen Hersel. The seasons changed slowly on the dust moon of Asval 3. No spring. Number winter. Only a gradual shift in the wind's scent, the color of the horizon, and the rhythm of the people who survived its silence. It had been 4 months since Ralzara walked out of the throne hall with Rian's hand in hers. 4 months since she let the fire consume her insignia, her legacy, her place in the empire. 4 months since she'd spoken to her father, to her people, to anyone who once whispered her name with awe or fear. On Asval 3, there were no whispers. Only the hum of harvest tools, the hiss of dust against metal walls, and the warmth of skin pressed against skin at night when the air grew cold enough to crack glass. They lived in a structure, barely bigger than a military tent. 3 rooms, 1 bed, a single window. But it was theirs. And in that narrow space, stripped of protocol and titles, they learned how to build something that didn't require conquest or command. The first time Ralzara cried, she did so in silence. It was during a storm rain, rare and brutal slamming. The settlement with sideways winds that bent the perimeter towers. Lightning cracked across the valley. She stood by the window, shoulders bare, arms crossed tightly around herself, eyes watching the sky as if it had betrayed her. Rian came up behind her, wrapped a blanket around her back, didn't speak. Until, she whispered, I used to command storms like this. Redirect them. Weaponize them. He rested his chin on her shoulder. And now? Now, she breathed, I just want to be held through one. He turned her gently. Held her, not because she asked, because she finally could. That night, she didn't sleep beside him. She slept on him. Her body pressed full against his chest, one leg thrown over his waist, her hand flat against his sternum like she needed to feel every heartbeat to remind herself she was still alive, still loved. You breathe different when you sleep beside me, she murmured. He smiled into her hair. That's because I sleep deeper when you're on top of me. She smirked, brushing her lips over his jaw. Because I suffocate you? Completely, he said, and I love every second of it. They laughed quietly. Rain pounded the roof above them like applause, but outside their little world, the galaxy did not forget her name. Once a month, the Cum Tower lit up with encrypted messages from Zenturi outposts, none addressed to her directly. She never read them, never replied. But sometimes, Rian caught her standing beneath the antenna at dusk, eyes closed, as if listening for something she would never admit. One evening, a stranger arrived at the edge of the settlement. A merchant, or a spy. Dressed in sand-worn robes, face covered, carrying an old satchel. He came to trade metal parts. Nothing suspicious, but when his eyes met Ralzara's, he stiffened. He dropped his goods, stepped back. Whispered, "Emerald wound," and then ran. News spread fast. By sundown, half the village knew who she once was. The woman who had crushed rebellions, the daughter of the warlord. The exile with blood on her hands and love in her bed. Some watched her with awe, others with fear, but none dared speak it aloud. That night, Ralzara stood in front of the mirror, brushing her braid loose. Do you regret it? She asked. Rian looked up from their small bed, the sheet pooling around his waist. Burning your title? She nodded once, eyes focused on her reflection. He walked to her, stood behind her again like he had that first storm. But this time, he took the brush from her hand and began braiding her hair for her. No, he said. But I regret not kissing you the first time I saw you. She laughed. But her eyes stayed wet. The next day, the village sent a quiet message. No confrontation. No exile. Just a vote. A public decision about whether she would be allowed to stay. When the results were announced at sunset, the elder read the tally without raising his voice. 32 in favor, 6 against, 1 abstention. Then, without ceremony, he looked at her and said, You built something here. You belong to it now. Ralzara's shoulders dropped. And for the first time since the fire devoured her past, she cried without silence. She turned to Rian. He walked straight into her arms. No armor. No braid. No fear. They were no longer just fugitives of power. They were founders of something new. The heat that night was different. Not the sunburned dry heat of Asval III's dusty afternoons. No, this heat came from within, from skin warmed by trust, from breaths shared beneath rough linen sheets in a home made not of luxury but of truth. Rain tapped gently on the tin roof. A rare, rhythmic hush. Thunder groaned far in the distance, like the gods were watching with held breath. Ralzara stood in the doorway, soaked, her tunic clinging to her body like a second skin. Her braid had come undone, strands curling against her cheeks, her shoulders. Her eyes, even in the dim stormlight, glowed like deep green fire. Rian was shirtless, barefoot, folding laundry, of all things. When he turned and saw her wild, dripping, feral with emotion, he froze. She said only one word, strip, his brow arched. Now? She didn't repeat herself. He obeyed. Every article came off slow, half laughing, half aroused, always hers. When he stepped forward, she pulled him into her arms like a lifeline she'd nearly let go of. Her lips brushed against his as her legs locked around his waist, wet skin against bare chest, and they stumbled toward the bed like fugitives collapsing. Back into freedom. She pinned him down. Not with force. With need. I used to be feared, she whispered into his ear. He kissed her collarbone, hands traveling the familiar lines of her back. You still are. Not here. He pulled back, met her eyes. No. Not here. Here you're just soft in the dark. Her breath hitched. She looked down at him, her warrior's face cracking in the gentlest way. You were the only one. Who didn't kneel when ordered, she murmured. I knelt when it mattered. Her lips parted in a grin, wide and sharp and deeply hers. She leaned down, kissed him like a declaration. Outside, the storm grew louder. Inside, they matched it. Their bodies moved together like memory, like rhythm, like a covenant. Nothing rushed. Nothing claimed. No battles fought, only ground surrendered. Willingly. After, she lay with her cheek on his chest, tracing the lines of his ribs with fingers that once pulled triggers, once drew maps of war. I dreamed, she said softly, that we had a child. He stilled. What did they look like? Taller than you, she said with a smirk, terrifying. And gentle, she added. A long pause. Then he whispered, Do you want that? She didn't answer immediately, but her fingers stopped, tracing. I don't know if I can be a mother, she admitted. You led an empire, he said. You survived exile. You led me. You're easier than a child. Debatable. She laughed quietly. They didn't speak again for a long time. Just lay there, wrapped in the aftermath of honesty, in the heat of the storm and the heat of each other. Then, in the silence that followed, a small beep echoed from the corner of the room. A message. Their relay hadn't buzzed in weeks. Ralzara sat up slowly, crossed the room bare, wrapped only in a loose shawl. She tapped the console. Her eyes scanned the message once. Then twice. Rian sat up. What is it? She turned. Her face unreadable. Then she handed him the pad. He read it. A transmission. Encrypted. Sent. Not from the Empire. But from the fractured caste, a splinter faction of Zenturi rebels, who had broken off after her exile. It read. You were right to walk away. They've lost their honor. We haven't, and we need someone like you, not to lead, to guide. There is a new way forming, and it bears your name. His hands trembled slightly as he looked up. They want you back. They want us, Rian, she said, stepping closer. As something more than royalty or soldiers. He shook his head in disbelief. Are you ready to step back into that world? She cupped his face. Not the old world, she said. Something better. Something we build. Like this place. Like us. He took her hand, kissed it. Then we do it together. 3 months later, the winds on Aswell 3 shifted. Not with war. But with purpose. Tents were erected. Refugees from both sides arrived. Former caste. Discarded soldiers, diplomats in hiding, humans and Zenturi who had nowhere else to belong. The exile settlement became something else. A beginning. They never claimed titles, never raised banners, but people followed Ralzara like they always had, not out of fear this time, but out of belief. And when Rian stood beside her, they saw more than a human. They saw a man who made the emerald wound feel safe. They saw love not as weakness, but as revolution. And beneath that quiet moon, in a home that once held only 2, something new was born. Not an empire. Not a throne. A future. And one night, long after the others had gone to sleep, as Ralzara lay wrapped in blankets and Rian held her from behind, his hand resting gently over her stomach, she whispered, They'll never understand what we gave up. He kissed the back of her neck. They don't have to. Outside, stars burned. Inside, love endured. Not as legend. But as fact.